This is Beyond a Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Gary Smith.
I never get tired of listening to Awesome Dawson. What's the name of that guy, kid who looks like he's Dawson's child, who you guys have hired?
That's Ben. Ben? Young Ben, as I've been referring to him. He's I got
a lot of Bens in my life, but that guy looks like, has he had a paternity test? He looks like he should be related to Dawson.
They sure are close. It's a little startling.
Isn't it? You look at him and you say, Jesus, what's Dawson doing to himself? He looks fantastic.
Yeah, Dawson must have cut out the smoking and, he's over there eating his greens, but no, it's just young Ben.
So where do we start today? We only got 15 minutes and a lot of topics. The Depp trial starts tomorrow.
Yeah, they're going back.
Apparently, boy, talk about the great divide. I mean, you could be on whatever side of it, but boy, it sure is polarizing, isn't it? What do you attribute that to? I've said gender, but I don't know that gender necessarily goes deep enough or is nuanced enough for this.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think gender is definitely playing a role, but I think that, I think time is really your biggest factor. I think the fact that this is going on for so many weeks and they're taking these breaks and there's time for the internet to just digest it. I've gotten to watch, at least in my own household, the opinions change in the opposite gender. My wife started out maybe not the biggest Johnny Depp fan, but the more this goes on and the more she gets DM'd Instagram clips of this insanity, the more she's like, oh, Jesus, Dad, I want my son to stay as far away from women like that as possible.
I would say I'm talking with Megyn Kelly the other day on her show.
Sure.
And I was saying, I hate to voice I don't hate to. I often voice unpopular opinions, but sitting in courtrooms, I've seen women who have acted exactly like Amber did. And I say acted, not in the sense of necessarily ascribing that she was phony, but that those same kinds of dramatic pauses, the same kinds of delivery and things like that. And they said, I've been there where experts have been put on by prosecutors that said, no matter what somebody does who's a complaining witness, and that's for those of you who know, I rarely use the term victim because in my opinion, that's a legal conclusion.
Correct.
But complaining witnesses can say they can have various forms of their complaints, and you will always find an expert, so-called expert, who will attribute that to being how they manifest their complaint, and that you can't really suggest otherwise at risk of not being insensitive. I mean, that happens in actual courtrooms. Those are evidentiary positions that prosecutors often take and plaintiffs' lawyers often take. So before you go off on one side or the other, understand something that we're talking about a courtroom. I know that on the internet it's a different version, but in a courtroom, you'd be surprised.
It's a very different version. And since we're on the internet, I would be remiss to not cover the one story that we haven't really highlighted here. I wonder, have you seen, I'm sure you have, but have you ever seen in a courtroom you've been in the alleged coke sniff that she did? Have you seen this one where she has the tissue, but then she sniffs up and, you have
it ready to play because
I can get it in a second. It's, it's, I don't think that's what she did, but it sure is fun to talk about.
Well, and, you go back and forth on these televised trials. I have said famously the biggest regret I have over trying Peterson's almost 20 years ago is that I went along with the idea that it not be televised. And one of the arguments, at least, if you've got somebody who's infamous, not famous, but infamous, when they're being tried in a criminal case, is that if it turns out that it's a circumstantial case, you would rather that people see the evidence as it unfolds, as opposed to hear it filtered through somebody else. But now you've got this case, and mind you, this is not a criminal case, and I still don't understand the motivations and the calculus behind bringing this case, because I have seen nothing that tells me that people that Johnny Depp has been vindicated. It still seems like a pox on both your houses. However, it sure says something about when we live or the time we live in, because if you remember during the Trump era, the 4 years, kind of these supersized cotton candy trials never really got any kind of traction. But now we're back in the post-Trump, if you will, era, and all of a sudden these trials are coming back. I mean, you've got a resurgence of what normally was the summer fare for cable news, which has now jumped over to the streaming platform.
Well, by all means, let's do our part.
Cotton candy for the brain.
Yeah, yeah, I mean the hold of the nostril there is really, it's what does her in. It's when she brings the other hand up, she's got the tissue. It's but I'm sure that's not what's happening, but it sure is fun.
Well, that's what I mean. I mean, at a certain point, and as far as the lawyers go, I mean the criticism of the lawyers in the courtroom, in some cases spot on, in other cases I think unfair. But all in all, it's quite a spectacle, and it resumes. If you're watching this on Sunday, it resumes tomorrow on Monday.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll be watching carefully because it just sure is fun. All right, let's get to one that you and I have teased, but we haven't been able to get to because there's just been too much going on. High velocity impact splatter directly ties Alex Murdaugh to the double homicides. So his previous unimpeachable alibi that we've been talking about, that had been bandied about for months, now he's got the impact splatter, meaning that whether or not he was a perpetrator of the murder or not, he was there. He was there when the victims, his wife and his son died. Now, I just based on wanting to be right, I have to stick with my thing that I've always said about the gambling. This makes me, wonder as well if it was not done in front of him as a means of sending a message, a very, very direct message that he needs to pay up. But what is your take on this, and why do you believe that they are being so methodical before they charge him? I mean, we're going on close to a year now.
Well, in a case like this, remember, one of the things when people mention high velocity impact splatter, if you're one of the people who's watching the case that Dave Rudolph tried, the staircase, which was also another Peterson, a defendant named Peterson or an accused named Peterson, high impact velocity splatter and these blood splatter type evidence became essential there. That was kind of one of the forensic areas that they skirmished upon. I think one of the reasons here is they understand that circumstantially it's always a tough case to make. There's, prosecutors love it when it's somebody who's close to the victim, because it shows they can make all kinds of arguments and it kind of shifts the landscape. Here, they don't have to worry about this guy going anywhere because they've already got him in custody. They've already charged him with all kinds of other crimes. That gives them the prosecutorial ability to kind of press pause and time out and do a really thorough investigation as opposed to being rushed to bringing a case. And so I understand that. I still keep saying it. I don't know if he's still involved, and I haven't looked recently, but Dick Harpootlian, who is just a tremendous lawyer, was his lawyer at one point. I don't know if Dick still is, but that's Gary, certainly somebody that I would love to talk to if he would talk to us.
Yeah, absolutely. The invitation is open. We have reached out, and at the time, I don't think he was open to that. But if he is in the future, he is absolutely welcome. Yeah, I mean, that does make sense. They've got him. I believe he's been charged with upwards of 50 crimes so far. So he's in jail. He's not going anywhere. It's not like
he's going anywhere.
Right.
So
why not just take the time to go about it methodically and really get your ducks in a row? That makes sense to me. There's one other story that you sent me that I have not had a chance to review in detail, so I'm going to let you take the lead. But it's about a son of an auto engineer, a mechanic, who has gone into the drone making business.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. It was in the New Yorker, and the reason I was fascinated by it is one of the people who listen to this podcast will know that I often will talk about similarities and the dissimilarities between the Artsakh War by the Azerbaijanis and the Ukraine invasion by Russia, and the kind of the overlaps. One of the overlaps that this article demonstrates in stark relief is that during the Artsakh War, at the very beginning, it looked like Artsakh was going to prevail, or that at least they were going to hold their ground from the invaders of Azerbaijan. But then there started the kind of the military landscape started to shift, and it started to shift because of these drones that were implemented by the Azerbaijanis. And I've always mentioned that the Azerbaijanis have a close relationship with Ukraine. In fact, they used to send much of their military there. They used to get trained, and they do training exercises. And for those who don't know, Ukraine also had a connection to NATO when it came to those things. And obviously in that area of the world, it's a complex dance of relationships that exist. So much so that prior to the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, Russia had a trilateral agreement that was signed both by Azerbaijan and Turkey, and the agreement was to, I always thought, to try to freeze the Azerbaijanis from reciprocating back to Ukraine. Well, if you look at this article, one of the reasons that Ukraine has been able to fend off or at least stalemate the Russians is because that same war drone technology that caused so much death and destruction in Artsakh and was used indiscriminately against civilians has now been adopted by the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians have been able to forestall the Russians to some degree because of that. And the inventor of this, and this is kind of the article itself out of the New Yorker lionizes the inventor, who is of Turkish descent and lives in Turkey and has become somewhat of a celebrity, if you will, right, for his creation of this drone and the drone technology, which is used in war.
It really is interesting the way that article paints him as a hero. And, I'm sure depending on which side of a particular conflict you're on, maybe you do view him that way. He's designed this drone, the Bayraktar, I believe it's pronounced TB2. And by the way, that could be completely wrong pronunciation. So please light up my Twitter mentions as you do, whether I ask for it or not. He's made this flat gray unmanned UAV that fits in the bed of a pickup truck, and it carries guided munitions that are so specific that they can get into a specific trench of a war. It just light up a very, very specific place for low cost. And it's reading that article.
Changed the coast. We now have, in the span of less than 2 years, two major kind of military engagements where whoever possessed this technology was able to kind of turn the tables, if you will, at the expense of civilians and others. Ideally, you would like to think that this is, the argument for it, if you will, is that it allows for precision, accuracy, and in taking out military and warlike installations. But clearly in Artsakh, that did not work because many children and civilians were killed. And clearly in Ukraine, it looks like so far it has turned the tide and given the Ukrainians an ability to forestall the Russians in a lot of areas. But it's also, there is an argument that can be made that the Ukrainians, by virtue of using that and increasing the frustration of the Russians, have then ended up leveling their civilian areas because the disproportionate response that the Russians have been using in response to the drone technology. So it really is kind of I guess at an antiseptic level, it's a chess match, but it's still a game of war, a real life war with real life people that are getting killed, maimed, and destroyed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and there's an argument to be made that using that kind of technology might be pushing Putin or the Russian military to go for larger, more devastating options, which obviously no one wants. The article is called "The Turkish Drone That Changed the Nature of Warfare," and I would encourage any of our listeners to go read it. But read it as I did, because I read it very differently, having been sent it by Mark as opposed to coming across it myself or finding it, being sent it by somebody else. When you read it with the lens of Mark Garrigus sent this, you're not going to read it the way the author intended. You're gonna have a bit of a different spin on it, which I think is healthy.
Well, I think it gives you some perspective on, hey, when it's, their ox that's getting gored, rah, rah, rah. But hey, I know that we don't have an institutional memory that goes beyond a year, but remember a year ago, this was used on a peaceful civilian population that has been in that area for a millennia, and it did a lot of destruction and really upended kind of the order over there.
Absolutely. Mark, I appreciate your time on a Sunday. We will see you this week for a full hour, best hour in the universe. And
we may drop that early this week, right? Or not?
I think that might be next week that we're doing that. Oh, no. Yeah, we're going to drop it a day early. It's going to be on Thursday instead of Friday this week. You're right, Mark. Your memory is better than mine. I'm understandably a little frazzled. You got a little man there. That concentrating on the little man takes a lot. Well, the little man. Yeah.
Speaking of little man, I want to say hi to Dina and wish her well. She just had a young boy, a little boy, Stefano, this morning. And,
Mazel tov. Congratulations, Dina.
Yeah. Fantastic, Dina. Congratulations to you.
All right, Mark. Thank you for your time on a Sunday. I appreciate it, and I will see you this week for more Reasonable Doubt. We love you.
Thank you. Bye, Gary.
Bye, Mark. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Beyond a Reasonable Doubt. Stay tuned for more bonus episodes coming soon.